Hello to our business jet traveler readers and friends, and thank you so much for joining us today. We all know that the world of private aviation can be as complicated as it is wondrous, so we are thrilled to have the opportunity to help break it down for you right now. A couple of quick items before we start. Everyone will receive a copy of this presentation and also a recording, so you don't have to take notes. And also, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the questions section of the webinar panel. We will address all of them, and if we can't get to them, we will reach out to you privately. I just want to emphasize there are no stupid questions in private aviation. If you're wondering about something, there's 10 other people who are afraid to ask that same question, so please ask it. And also, as you leave, you'll have a short survey, so if you have time to fill that out, it would be great, so that we can help to tailor future events. So before we get started, I think we're going to have a little poll. Which of these answers best describes the experience you have had with flying privately? So we will watch as those answers come in. And it's looking like, okay, perfect. You're the perfect audience for what we have planned. Oh, this is perfect. So we can help everyone in the audience today. And I was hoping that we could, okay, I think we're about finished with the poll. Yeah. All right. So I am excited to welcome to this panel my BJT colleagues, Matt Thurber and Charles Alcock. And together we are honored to welcome Robert Baltus, COO of the European Business Aviation Association, and Ryan Waguespack, Senior Vice President of the National Air Transportation Association. Thank you so much to Robert and Ryan for your expertise and service and for taking the time to join us today. Okay, so reminder, this is how you connect with us in the question panel, and please help your fellow travelers and ask questions. So we're going to start with charter. Charlie, we are seeing quite a few people who are considering private travel for the first time right now because of the pandemic. And this is a process that definitely, understandably, can seem overwhelming because of the variety of options available. But maybe we'll just start with charter, and I was hoping you could break down the basics and maybe how somebody could take that first flight.
Yeah, certainly. Well, first of all, it's definitely the case we're hearing from the front lines that there are more first-timers coming into private aviation because of COVID. It's very understandable, the sort of concerns and anxieties that COVID have triggered get people focused on the sort of travel experience that they desire. So that is happening. And when these newcomers come to the sector, of course, for the most part, their heads are still in the world of scheduled airline service. In other words, they've traveled via airline, and they've pretty much taken that for granted, that the market will take care of them according to their ability to pay, fundamentally. So what they find in private aviation is an extraordinary choice, and I would say right now there is incredible value, particularly in this charter sector. The question is, how do you find the right thing for you, and how are you sure that all the assumptions that you used to make about what an airline would be in terms of safety and reliability can be guaranteed in the charter world? So there are several places to look. First of all, you can simply go online. You can simply go and ask Dr. Google, how do I find a charter operator who will take me where I want to go? And for many people, that will throw up an array of choices, some of, or any of which could be perfectly suitable, but it does throw up all sorts of questions like, I've never heard about this company. How do I know that they're actually legit? And we're going to get to that aspect of this in a moment. The other thing they can do is use a broker. Now, in this context, think of a broker as being like an old school travel agent that people used to go to on their main streets until sometime in the 1990s to book a trip. A broker will help you narrow down this choice will be able to answer and mitigate many of the concerns that you might have. But then, of course, the broker is commercially motivated. You know, they have to earn a living somehow or other. So you are then choosing to include a middleman in the transaction. But a good broker certainly adds value. The other thing you can do is to go to a so-called block charter or Jet Club membership type program. This is essentially a way that the industry has consolidated private aviation service and sort of packaged it up in a way that makes it a bit more manageable and accessible to many consumers. And it has some parallels with the world of timeshare, although the industry doesn't particularly like that comparison. But basically, it's packaging up choices. To some extent, it's reducing the number of decisions you have to make. And in some cases, block charter programs actually offer greater value, because by committing ahead of time to a certain number of flight hours, you're going to get a better rate. And I think that the choices between those options really comes down to what sort of a consumer are you. If you are a consumer who wants a high degree of control, you trust your instincts to find a good deal, then you're probably going to be that person who'll do fine just searching online. If you really can't be bothered with all that stuff, you feel overloaded by choices, then potentially narrow down your choice by going to something like block charter or include a broker. And then in terms of how you find a reputable company, well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but some of the early clues you can look out for in a charter operator is that operator accredited by EBAA, which is a recognized industry standard. You could also watch out and see whether the company has been audited by one of the industry standard auditing companies like Wyvern. And also look out for clues such as, is the company a member of an association like NATA? And you know, we're happy to be joined by Ryan today, or EBAA, the European Business Aviation Association, or its equivalent in the States, the NBAA. Those are all pretty good clues. So the great news is there's wonderful choice, there's great value, and you just want to be an informed consumer.
Okay, excellent. And before Ryan and Robert are going to go a little bit more into how, you know, things to watch out for and how to be safe when getting your first charter flight. I was hoping that maybe, Charlie, you could just tell us a little bit about what people can expect when they're going to fly for the first time privately, as opposed to the airlines.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very simply, what you're going to experience is an incredibly distilled and wonderful version of air transport as you've experienced it in the airline world. So think about the most incredible first class experience you've had with an airline, and you got to visit their special club at the airport. It's 10 times better than that, because the truth is it's all about you. You're the only person who matters. You're not just in a small group of, you know, VIPs. You are the VVIP. You're the only thing that matters. And when you first arrive, you're going to visit a building that in the industry is called an FBO, which is one of these meaningless acronyms that we throw around. It actually means fixed based operator, which tells you very little. Think of it as a private terminal. It's an ultra exclusive private terminal, and its only reason for being there is to service you and the small number of other travelers who go through that. The security measures are all going to be there. Security is just as important in the private aviation world. The only difference is there are smaller numbers of travelers. So of course, the controls that need to happen can take place in a much less burdensome way. And everybody you meet from the minute you get into this private terminal to when you get on board the plane is completely focused on your needs and preferences. The good operators will have an understanding of exactly what you want to achieve. And in partnership with the ground handling people, they're going to make that happen. When you get on board the aircraft, and this is where it pays to shop carefully ahead of time, you know, you're going to want to make sure that you have a good expectation of what you're going to find inside the aircraft. Some private aircraft, you know, although they're very, very good at getting you from A to B in an efficient way, might be a bit smaller than you've imagined them. Again, back to the airline first class experience, there are some first class airline seats that are actually bigger than some of what you'll find on private jets. But it's the overall experience that you want to measure. And really, most of the time, it's just plain fantastic.
Right. And actually that video, the video that we just showed, that was, I was on a press trip. That was obviously pre-COVID, because you do still have to wear a mask. There, you know, obviously we were not 6 feet apart on the plane, but if it's just you and your family, then you probably don't have to wear masks once you get on the plane. Okay, well, thank you, Charles. I was hoping that maybe I could just take a quick break because we are getting several questions about COVID and the precautions that FBOs are taking and sort of how it works during the pandemic. So maybe Ryan, I know you've been traveling a lot lately, both privately and commercially. Can you just tell us a little bit about what the FBOs and the operators are doing to make it safer?
Absolutely. And Jennifer, thank you for having us on to discuss this important topic, because the pandemic has definitely thrown some interesting curveballs into our industry. We live in a very fluid, the fixed-based operators, the air carriers, we live in a very fluid state. So when the pandemic started, we were able to quickly adapt. NATA quickly created a COVID task force that started re-looking at how we do business, right? How we engage our customers from an air carrier perspective, how our ground handlers engage the crews and our passengers. And we were looking at it from a door-to-door scope to make sure that everybody feels as safe and and technically as clean as possible, right? So we developed a safety first clean standard, working with CDC and cleaning experts that focus in on the fixed-based operators. So best practices, guidelines, it's a free standard for FBOs. We're over 600 locations now in the US and globally, which is really exciting. And then, of course, operators really started looking at how do we engage our customers, right? Where we used to meet with a handshake, now we may meet with a hand over our chest and a slight bow. How we turn on the entertainment systems in the aircraft has been modified because we want to ensure confidence in our flying membership and public. And it, as you pointed out and Charlie pointed out, it is continuing to grow.
Okay, great. Did you personally notice a difference? I mean, I know you're well deep in the industry, but when you flew on an airliner versus privately recently?
Absolutely. I mean, when we look at it from the difference between going through a terminal and an FBO, a fixed-based operation, the touch points are dramatically different. You can go through an FBO and have under a handful of touch points. You could actually go straight out from your car into the aircraft itself, or at least under 5 touch points through the doors, and to provide your license or your identification to the crews to ensure that you're getting on the right aircraft. So absolutely, I mean, that's kind of what our industry is set up for, and unfortunately the air carriers just haven't been able to adapt as well with the moving of the masses. So it is remarkably different.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well said. And Robert, maybe you have some things to add about what's happening in Europe. We have quite a few people here today from all over the world, but also from Europe. So thanks.
Yeah, and Jennifer, thank you for having us as well. And I think Ryan summed it up nicely. And I think the beauty and the nature of our business is, you fly private because you want the flexibility, you want the security, you want the safety. So that was already there before COVID. The security and safety is relatively easy to do because you have smaller numbers. You decide who's on board of your aircraft, and it's a small group of people, so that makes it much easier. Now, the only thing which really, because if you look at the number of contaminations on an aircraft, etc., with aircrew, it's minimal or nearly zero. So the risk is extremely low, and the only annoyance, and this is a European perspective, is that we have 27 different countries with different rules from a health perspective. So aviation-wise, it's one huge market, and we're flexible, and we have the same high standard you can expect from our members. The only thing is, the countries you fly to, they still have different rules, and that's going to stay there for another few months, and hopefully then everybody starts to appreciate, okay, this really works or this doesn't work, and we get the same standard, and that's what we really want. But the main point is, it used to be, but especially in times like this, it is the most safe and secure way of traveling.
Okay, great. That's a great point about the different countries and different rules. I hadn't really given that much thought. Okay, terrific. So we're now going to go to my colleague, Matt Thurber. He is the editor-in-chief of AIN and all of our products. Matt, we are, just so everyone knows, we are going to be doing future webinars, a series on flying privately. So we will have something dedicated to fractional shares and dedicated to full ownership, and several other topics. So we will be getting into this later on in the year. But in the meantime, Matt, could you just go into beyond charter some of the other options that people can be looking at when it comes to business aviation?
Sure, thank you, Jen. And the easiest way to try private aviation is charter, and there's about 2,000 charter operators in the US alone, and a lot more brokers that arrange charter flights. But if you really want to get a taste of flying privately on a regular basis, you might consider a jet card or a membership program. A jet card reserves a certain number of hours, or in some cases days, that you can use as you need them. For example, a 25-hour jet card lets you fly for up to 25 hours, usually in a specific size of airplane, but sometimes you can trade up and down in the sizes, which, you know, if you trade up, that's going to use the hours a little bit faster. And the key thing is that buying a chunk of hours makes it a lot easier. You're dealing with one company. You can use the hours, and you generally pay for just the time that you're going somewhere and not the cost of returning the airplane back to the base. Now, a club membership gives you access to a provider's whole fleet of aircraft, and you're still paying hourly rates and other fees, but if you like the services that the membership club provides, that may be the way to go. And the chief benefit here is that you're not just going out and chartering an airplane from any old operator, but you're using the same fleet, the same flight crews, the same safety standards, and the amenities and facilities offered by a club. So that might be a big advantage.
Okay, great. And with membership clubs, what are some of the other benefits? You know some of those offhand?
Sure.
I mean, I know it's things like lifestyle, but sometimes there's, you know, we all have heard of Wheels Up.
Yeah, there's lifestyle benefits. Like some of the clubs offer partnerships with experiences and special events, that kind of thing. But the really big advantage is dealing with one company. They have a customer service organization that takes care of all your needs. It's a consistent fleet of aircraft. In the case of Wheels Up, they own all their own aircraft and take care of them. In some cases, the membership program even has its own facilities at airports, so it's kind of like a private FBO, which gives even better service to the club members.
It makes it even more exclusive.
Exactly.
Okay, this is not on the script, but I just want to take a break. We're getting some really excellent questions. I think this one might work for Ryan best. There's some questions about the charter operators, and I know we're going to get to this a little bit later on, but could you go into how charter operators, how they go through an audit? And so what you're looking for in terms of if it's like what kind of accreditations are you looking for with a charter operator, and what sort of hoops do they have to jump through to get those?
You're saying which different auditors, like Argus and Wyvern,
and do all charter operators have those things? Like, what are you looking for if you're going in blind from a safety standpoint?
Sure. Yeah. No. So not all operators go through the third-party auditors. Again, once you become an air carrier and you're a certified air carrier, that is the minimum here in the U.S. That is the minimum standard to operate commercially. And so these third-party auditors, Argus, Wyvern, EBAA, have come up with a higher level of auditing to the operator. Because again, safety is absolutely key here, and ensuring that and being able to showcase that out to the marketplace. So it's not to say that if an air carrier does not have those audits done, that they are unsafe at all. It's that just a higher level of safety.
Okay,
Charles,
great.
do you have anything to add on that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could just talk a little bit about what would be the minimum if a friend of yours calls up and says, have you ever heard of this operator? What are the things, Charlie, that you would look for to help steer your friend in the right direction?
Well, the reason I think that the accreditation offered by people like Argus and Wyvern is significant, it's not because I'm saying it's the only measure of safety. And Ryan is 100% right. There are established legal standards that have to be met, and you might say as a consumer, then why do I need any more? Well, the way to understand these auditing agencies is that what they do is often required by major corporations, and at least as importantly by their insurance companies. And it's a way of just challenging each operator and saying, okay guys, I know you're doing the absolute required minimum, but let's find out how much above and beyond that you are doing. And what they do is they evaluate not only the rule book that's there that they've signed up for, but how they implement that rule book on a day-to-day basis. How consistent are they? What measures, what practices, what processes do they have to make sure that they're exceeding those standards every single day? So I do think that's a pretty good shorthand cue to look out for those, because if some major Fortune 500 company has required that with their army of liability attorneys, then you can be pretty sure they've had to jump over a pretty high bar to get there.
Okay, that's a great point. And even better if they've been audited by two, right? By two different Wyvern and Argus. Okay. Also, Charlie, while you're here, there's another excellent question about pertaining to, is there a separate fee for going through the FBO? And maybe just in very basic terms, because there are additional fees, charter flights that sometimes people are not aware of. And Ryan, you can speak to this as well. And this is kind of, you don't want any surprises when you're paying that kind of money, but often we see that in the beginning.
Yeah, that's a good point. My understanding, and I'll certainly defer to Ryan on this, is that for the most part, when you're quoted a rate for a charter flight, that actually includes, all the core services that are going to contribute to that service being provided. So that would include the use of the private terminal and all the handling arrangements. I believe there can be some variation on, the level of catering that might be provided. So, if all you want is a sandwich and a cup of tea, make sure you're not paying for everybody to have champagne that never gets served. But Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong there. Is it usually rolled in, those fees?
Absolutely. It's rolled into your charter quote. The only fees that, again, fees can pop up from time to time, especially right now during the winter months and de-icing. You might be looking at the weather and thinking that, hey, there wasn't any issue, but when they quoted the trip and they didn't necessarily put a line item in there for de-icing. So you may get that, especially now during these winter months, as a surprise. But that's usually those few items that come up on the back end.
Okay. All right. Matt is going to be speaking to us about fractional and whole ownership, but Matt, if you don't mind, I'm just going to pause and move to Robert, because the de-icing is a perfect segue into Robert, who's going to be helping us to understand why it's so expensive to fly privately. What are you paying for? And I think, there's some sticker shock initially, but Robert can explain to us why it's worth it.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting.
I
think it would be interesting to show people the different options. And there's so many different options, but the easiest way to look at it is if you look at from an hours perspective. So if you look how much do you intend to fly, look at the hours, and based on the hours, you can already have preconception of what kind of product works for you. So if you fly less than 25 hours, industry practices, probably charter is best for you. If you go over 25 hours and you want a standardized product, and you want to know the price ahead, that's where the cards are starting to get in. If you go up and fly more than 25 hours, the companies you fly with will probably come to you with a proposition and say, oh, well, maybe fractional kind of thing if they can offer that. Or that would be an option to look at, where you have the beauty of, again, it's a fixed price and it's standardized product-wise generally. And on top of that, 200 hours or more, then people will start to come to you and say, well, actually, it might be worthwhile to go for your own aircraft. Now, all of these options, and this is the thing you mentioned about price. Price is always on the higher side, but it's it's like using a bus versus a taxi. This is a product that picks you up from where you are to where you want to go, and you can decide on what kind of taxi it will be. Do you want a light cabin, mid-sized cabin, large cabin, extra large? That will have a huge effect on your price. So my suggestion, and I when I go back to the poll at the beginning, I saw quite a number of people have flown already, but especially for the people who haven't used business aviation yet, start with a few charters or make a special deal with any of the other providers. If it's a card or share provider, say, hey, look, I want to try some different airplanes because they all look good on paper, but are they right for me and my family or my company? So let's start with that. Now, the second part of your question was about additional costs, etc. I think Ryan already pointed it out. There's two things really to worry about that generally pop up on top of things. And if you have a charter contract or whatever, a card contract, it should be in there. De-icing is a big one. Wi-Fi is the other one. It's getting better, but especially the initial aircraft with Wi-Fi, sometimes the Wi-Fi was almost more expensive than the flight. So be aware of that.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Now, there's one other thing, and I think Ryan already pointed it out nicely on the air carrier, or what in Europe is called a commercial operator. You will find great deals and great offers, but you need to realize what's included and what's not included. And if you go for a commercial airline, or in this case in the US an air carrier, Europe a commercial operator, you go for a company where the moment you book the flight, they check the airports. Can we fly there? Is it safe, legal, etc. to fly there? The day of the flight, you will have certified mechanics checking the aircraft. Is it airworthy today? Is the maintenance status up to date? Everything that has to do to be a commercial airline, like a commercial airline, needs to be done. So they do all those things. Your pilot will be there, and generally there will be a second pilot if it's on commercial operation, and you can be assured that they have been properly trained in simulators, in an approved training program, etc., etc. The weather on the day has been checked. So there's all these different levels of things that have been done. And that's the biggest trigger I think people always need to be aware of. You get what you pay for. So there will be cheaper flights, which sometimes are done under private rules, which technically it shouldn't be allowed, but it happens. If you see the same aircraft with a huge different price cap, big warning sign, and make sure you reach out to people who are aware of the industry to see if you are with a proper operator.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, I think this is an area where it's like childcare. You don't want to necessarily go with the lowest price. Okay, so if Matt, can you, now that we've seen this chart, maybe we can jump back to fractional and whole ownership and just a quick overview, because like I said, we have a series that will include these topics. But this is a little bit later on, not when you're first starting out, most likely.
Absolutely, Jen. So if you want to buy a portion of an aircraft, and there may be good tax reasons for doing so, You can buy a fractional share, or you can always buy a whole airplane. Now with a whole airplane, the costs of ownership are fairly high, but you have total control over the airplane and its schedule and availability. A fractional share gives you nearly the same benefits, including the tax benefits, but it's backed up by an organization that ensures a consistent level of service, availability, and safety. Usually there's depending on the size of the share you buy, there's a guarantee of a minimum number of hours before you will get picked up, starting about 4 hours. Now, shares range from 1/10 of a share, 1/8 of a share, 1/4, and more. Most fractional share companies give you a certain number of hours per share. Usually 1/8 of a share corresponds with 100 hours a year. And some provide a day-based system where you can buy a 1/6 share, for example, and get 20 days of usage with unlimited flight hours during that day. Now, keep in mind that fractional shares require a buy-in for the share itself, plus you're going to pay monthly management fees and hourly costs for when you're in the aircraft. It's not inexpensive, but it's very convenient because you don't have all the headaches of having to get a hangar for your aircraft, hire a crew, get the insurance, arrange for the maintenance, etc.
Okay, that's great. So why do you think that people are choosing fractional? It's because sometimes it can be just as expensive as owning your own aircraft, but is that, again, not to go back to price, but you also, are locked in there for a couple of years. Is it mainly because of the peace of mind that you don't have to deal with a management company? And
exactly. I mean, honestly, owning an aircraft of any kind can be a headache. There's just so many things you have to take care of. There's liability that you have to make sure is covered responsibly. Hiring a crew can be challenging. Training, maintenance, it's just a lot of work. And, it's not that it's not worth it, but some people just want a turnkey situation with the tax benefits of ownership, and there's still pride of ownership even if you own a share of an airplane. But it does definitely reduce the headache count. Right. But I should also point out, you could buy a whole airplane and have it managed by a professional management company, which can also take away some of the headaches. Another situation that sometimes occurs is companies that own whole aircraft will buy a fractional share as a backup, or in a larger size airplane to give them the lift they need on the limited occasions when they need it. So there are a lot of advantages to fractional shares.
Right. Okay, great. Well, I look forward to getting more into that down the road. And actually, also at the end of this webinar, we're going to be providing some show notes that have links to a special page that will give you all of the articles that where the Business Jet Traveler has covered all these different things, and we've put most of those materials on one page for you to access. And we'll send you that and plus many other. Okay, so I think we can now go to our second poll. And that is, what is the main reason why you would like to fly privately? And I think I have a feeling it immediately jumped up to 100% save time. Time is our. Okay, looks like, yeah, people want to save time. Okay. We maybe wanted, okay, 45% said save time. And we have, we do a BJT readers survey every year. And not a surprise that it's a very similar response, because time, it's a cliche, but it is our most precious commodity. So, and the results from the rest of the BJT survey will also be sent to you in the show notes. All right, so we're gonna, because we have these special guests, I was hoping that, Ryan, you could go in a little bit more to some of the things that people should watch out for and what the pitfalls are. I was also hoping you could describe the difference between a charter broker and a charter operator. Charlie touched on that, but what's the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So a charter broker, those companies typically, they do not operate the aircraft. They're an aviation liaison. And you could look at them as like an aviation consultant to say, hey, I want to do X mission, right, my trip, and they find the best aircraft in your area, region, to fit the mission that you're looking for. I've heard, horror stories of first timers getting in, they're chartering an aircraft directly with an operator, nobody's asking questions, and they're taking their entire family to Vail for a week, and the aircraft they chartered didn't have enough space to carry all the ski equipment and all of the baggage, and so it was last minute, changes and transitions. So a charter broker can help you work through that. A charter operator can do the same thing. A charter company, they are the groups that are actually the companies that are operating the aircraft, managing it, having the crews, employing the crews, managing the aircraft, employing the maintenance supervisors that are handling situations. Charter companies can also act as brokers. So if you go to your local charter company and say, I need to do this trip, and they don't have availability on their particular fleet, they can go off fleet and find solutions also to get your trip done. We're seeing an interesting surge because there is a lot of new activity in the private flying space, and it is challenging with all the new loophole, all the areas to focus in on, and areas to see, how do I know if this is a legitimate carrier? How do I know? Ask questions. I think that is the best thing as a 50,000 foot view you can do, is just ask as many questions as possible. Making sure the aircraft are on a certificate. What's the tail number? What's the operator's name? What are your insurance coverage amounts? There is a vast degree of difference between a private insurance coverages and commercial coverages. So ensuring that is areas that you're covered. The professionalism, right? Knowing that, are you getting, quotes in a timely fashion, itineraries with crew names, the operators' names. The devil's in the details, right? When you're getting all the information presented to you, the customer, in a very well detailed format, that's usually a good sign, right? That things are on track. Unfortunately, as Robert did point out, there is an area of private flying which is illegal or gray charter. And that is where someone can utilize an aircraft that's not on a commercial certificate. It's the buddy system. Hey, you can use my airplane, pay me X, right? Far too often we don't recognize that our regulators here in the States, and Robert would mirror the same thing, that our regulators have a high level of enforcement, right, for what happens in the skies above. Our government, the FAA, DOT here in the States, is heavily involved in private and now non-commercial operations and oversight. So for the last 20 plus years, there's been a heavy surge in illegal charter, part of the Uberization of our culture, right? I don't have to be on a commercial certificate. I can do a dry lease pool. I can do, and it's all these different one-offs that these aircraft are being operated commercially in a non-commercial environment, implying that they haven't jumped through the proper steps or haven't complied with the proper steps to maintain the aircraft, and or have the crews been properly trained. And that is an area that we have taken on, is really to try to go out and educate as much as possible out into the market. You know, if for those who do charter and you are concerned or questioning if the aircraft is on a certificate, we've built out at our website at nata.aero a way you can type in the tail number or type in an operator to see if that aircraft or that operator is a legitimate air carrier. And I find that very important, which is very good. Yeah, and I think the way to look at it when you do, we know you can legally dry lease an aircraft, right? Or legally timeshare with an aircraft.
Would you mind just going into what is a dry lease? What does that mean? Dry lease?
So dry lease is when you are leasing, you're taking on operational control of that aircraft without it being on a certificate. And it's coming, you know, it doesn't, technically a dry lease is legally not supposed to come with a crew. So you would have to go out and find your crew members. You can legally do a wet lease, which comes with a crew. It's not fuel, which you would normally think, but I think the best way it's been put to me was you can dry lease an aircraft, and that's kind of like going and renting a car. And you're taking on full operational control of that car. You have an accident, you're not walking away from that situation. You're having to deal with the insurance aspects, you're dealing with the police report, versus a taxi or, you know, a black car service, to where, okay, if something, you know, happens, you walk away. That operation, that taxi company or that black car service is calling you another car to come pick you up, and you don't have to think twice about it. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, no, okay, I thought somebody said something. Apologies. So there's a lot of areas of here that, you know, need to be in focus. And like I said in the beginning, really asking those questions. You know, it's like when you're at the rental car stations, like, do you want insurance? Well, I think I'm covered.
Right. That's a good point. And I think that people are afraid to ask questions. I'm afraid to ask questions sometimes, you know, because it's still an opaque industry, and a lot of people throwing around jargon, and, you know, there is no stupid question. You know, it's much better to just ask the questions and wait until you get it in terms that you understand. Robert,
I think Ryan summed it up perfectly. And just to make the analogy, if you fly Delta, you don't expect to be responsible for the whole aircraft. You know, but this is what happens because you signed something, and actually you go, you know, it makes no sense. But if you explain it as, you don't go to Delta Airlines either to say, oh, I'll just rent this whole aircraft and I'm responsible, and etc. That's what you do with a dry lease. So be really aware about it. Just one thing I would like to, which came up after we had this discussion, is do your homework. And actually what you're saying, Jennifer, is spot on. Ask questions, but also look in your network. There will be people who are flying. Ask them, might be at the airport, etc. You know, educate yourself a little bit, and that can save a lot of hassle. One of the things we see now is that online fraud is becoming a big thing. And this is not specific to business aviation. So it is, you know, people getting offered expat jobs on the other side of the world or things like that. And then, but there's a new one, and that is illegal charter, or not illegal charter, it is illegal websites or copied websites which offer a charter which is not there. Now, to put it in perspective, and we talked a little bit about price, you know, your average charter will be costing you, you know, almost the same price of a car, you know, a cheaper car, but it's quite a sizable amount of money. So don't just go on a website and Google, you know, Google say, I want to private jet, you know, charter a private jet, because it might be ending up somewhere in certain regions that are well known in Africa where there are actually fraudsters behind it. And we see websites like that pop up all the time. This is an old-fashioned thing. Yes, look it up on Google, but talk to the broker. And as Ryan rightly says, talk to a proper broker. maybe one is referred to by a friend or a colleague or somebody you know. It's the cheapest insurance before booking. After the flying, make sure you're on an air carrier in the US or a commercial operator. That's the cheapest insurance after you book the flight.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. And there are a lot of resources on the BJT home website, bjtonline.com. Obviously, we're going to give you also Robert and Ryan, as well as the National Business Aviation Association. They all have great amounts of resources. And I assume on both of your sites, can people find lists of accredited charter brokers, or can they look them up? Can they? I know that you can put a tail number in, but are there other resources?
Yeah, this is a difficult area, and the reason is that there's no, at least in Europe, there's no legal status. You know, you gotta bring your Rolodex, have a phone, and you are a broker. So it is very important that you find out. In Europe, and it is a global organization based in the UK, the Air Charter Association. They represent brokers. EBAA, we have a subcommittee of brokers, and there's probably, Ryan is probably better first on that, in the US, something similar. So make sure it's not, you know, a guy or a girl with a Rolodex and a phone, and make sure it's a substantial company. Don't forget, building a website. I can have the most beautiful website up tonight using whatever is available for free on the internet. Don't let that drive you. Talk to a person. It's very old-fashioned, but it works.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. We have a couple of questions coming in, and they're all excellent. Thank you, everyone who's asking questions. Matt, I'm going to just jump to you because one of them is about fractional, and it's a great question. How do share owners sell their shares if they're in a fractional program? And this is not that easy. This is why you want to really think about it. Maybe get an attorney, and we're switching now from charter to fractional, but it's much more of a commitment. And Matt, why is that?
Absolutely. Well, the fractional share companies all will provide you a means of exiting the program. And generally, when you buy a share, it's for usually about a 5-year period of time, although that can be negotiable. And after that 5 years, they will usually guarantee to buy it back from you at the then current market value. Now, there is a bit of a market separate from the fractional companies where you can buy and sell fractional shares, and there are some sales brokers who specialize in that. And the advice for when you are buying a fractional share is I wouldn't treat it any different than buying a whole airplane, in that I would make sure I consult with experts on the tax side, on the purchasing side, every aspect of the whole process. And by experts, I mean these are people with aviation expertise, not my corporate lawyer or liability consultant.
Okay, great. Yeah, and there are a couple. We actually have an interview with 2 attorneys who specialize in fractional shares, and that is on that page that you will all be receiving that has all of our resources. Okay. All right, so we are, Ryan and Robert, I know you don't like answering questions like this, but there's a lot coming up about accidents and how do I avoid a crash? How do I avoid an accident? Citing the Kobe Bryant crash, which is obviously a terrible tragedy. You don't have to speak on that one specifically, but how do people make sure that that never ever happens to them?
You want to go first, Robert?
Yeah. Yeah, no, at the end of the day, I think the most important is and it's almost repetitive, but do your homework. And if you have an operator who has a commercial certificate or an air carrier certificate, you know that at least the authorities have looked at it, and they've looked at that they met the standards that they laid out. So that's a very important one. I don't know the details of the Kobe Bryant one. The only thing that stood out for me is that it was single pilot. Now, those are things that you know, I fly myself. I make mistakes, and if there's two of you, you probably still will make mistakes, but the risk is smaller. The good thing is, if you look statistically at business aviation, corporate aviation, the commercially operated flights, and I speak about the European side mainly there, the safety risk is the same. So if you fly privately, so under a private means not under a certificate, then the risk profile becomes different. But there, everybody is lumped in. That could be, you know, it could be my father-in-law in his own when he's in his 90s still flying. So that's a different world. Make sure you're in a commercial environment, like with the airlines, and the safety profile and risk is almost the same. I would almost reverse it by saying, why are you still flying sometimes with commercial airlines in a time of COVID? If you look what, you know, the safety and the capsule you're in, the safety and security on COVID and things like that, with a lot of the operators, exceed what the commercial airlines do. So yes, and this comes back, is almost the theme, I think, is make sure you do a proper selection and let people help you make that selection.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to mirror the commercial side, the professionalism side, right? These are professional pilots flying in a commercial environment. The example that a couple of weeks ago, I was flying up in a Lear up to Cut Bank, Montana, and the captain came and said, hey, you know, it's negative 35 degrees there. If we can't find a hangar, right, there is a little bit of a risk. And my response was, again, any risk, we're not going, right? Because of his professional recommendation was X, and I want to listen to that, and I want to respect that, because that's what keeps us safe. Is they know what they're getting into, they know the meteorological, you know, conditions that we were facing that day, and you know, luckily they were able to find a hangar. But I was also told, don't be there longer than 1 hour, right? Because of the potentials. Done. I respect the guidelines and I respect the professionalism, and I think that is key. Yes, it was an expensive trip, but I still want to maintain that degree of professionalism and on that situation.
Right. And actually, I think, you know, I don't know if anybody, probably nobody in our audience would ever do this, but sometimes people will be in a hurry to get somewhere. You know, they're in Aspen, they want to get home, they have an important board meeting, something. I mean, now we have Zoom, but whatever it is, you have to listen to your pilot, right? No matter what. Like the pilot, don't argue with the pilot.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. And don't continue to push. There's a reason he or she is saying, hey, let's pump the brakes. Let's give it an hour. Let's give it, unfortunately we're socked in, or X, Y, and Z, right? So okay. Absolutely.
And if that happens, Charlie, if that happens and your flight is canceled, is it on the charter company to get you a new flight?
Well, yes, you have a commercial arrangement with that charter company. You've booked to make a trip. So yes, it would fall to them, first of all, to make alternative arrangements. If you've used a broker, then it could be that the broker would be involved. But I am so glad that Ryan and you just made that point about the sort of personal responsibility that private travelers have, because there have been, unfortunately, accidents in the past where when the investigation's done, sure enough, they found out that the traveler, in some cases, applied unreasonable pressure on the pilots. And, I was the one at the beginning of this discussion saying, hey, you're the boss, you're the king, everything's about you. That's all true, but money can't buy you around safety responsibility. And trying to pressurize the pilots to do things that shouldn't be done is wrong, and it's just as ridiculous as basically going to see an expensive doctor and ignoring the advice that doctor gives you, basically. And there's just no dodging that at all, nor should there be.
Right. Okay, great point. I think we are just about coming to the end, and I'm conscious of people's time so that we can stop right well within the hour. Anyone who, I did see all of there's some specific questions about South America, and I will get to everyone who asked questions. We will reach out to you privately. But in closing, I would like to thank Robert and Ryan so much for joining us today. And also thank you so much to all of our readers and friends around the world. You're all in different time zones, and I know how precious time is, so thank you for spending it with us today. Everybody will be getting a copy of the slides and also a recording of this webinar. And I would like to, you can also reach out to me directly. My email is jenglish@bjtonline.com. You can subscribe to our twice weekly BJT Waypoints newsletter, which has a lot of great information in it twice a week. And we will also in that newsletter be able to let you know about our future webinars that are coming up, and I hope to see you all there. So thank you so much for joining us.